They don't have time to go to the street market, so they go to the supermarkets to buy.
In an intellectually sophisticated analysis that married political philosophy with biographical reflection, Dr. Didacus Jules contextualized Sir John Compton's achievements within the dialectical tension between individual agency and systemic constraint.
The father of our nation's independence, a statesman whose vision, discipline, and sense of destiny have indelibly shaped the Saint Lucia that we know today. And permit me to frame these remarks with an unexpected, deliberately provocative, but revealing lens, a quotation from Karl Marx. Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. Marx was not writing about Sir John, but in many ways he could have been. Sir John Compton made his own history, not under circumstances of his choosing, but within the inherited constraints of colonial subjugation, economic dependency, and social stratification. What made him exceptional was his refusal to allow those circumstances to define the boundaries of his imagination.
The OECS chief executive recounted Sir John's trajectory from scholarship student in the British Empire to revolutionary statesman who rejected the colonial system's intended outcome, producing administrators rather than transformers of the established order. Jules emphasized how Compton's encounter with rural poverty catalyzed his conviction that St. Lucians must offer their own destiny, referencing a previously recorded interview where the late Prime Minister became visibly emotional, describing childhood mortality from preventable diseases. Beyond cataloging Compton's tangible achievements, educational expansion, infrastructural development, and institutional creation, Jules articulated a more nuanced assessment of leadership that acknowledges complexity without diminishing accomplishment.
He belonged to that generation of brilliant young West Indians, sons of small villages, nurtured in modest homes, but steeped in moral seriousness, who won scholarships to study at the heart of the British Empire. The system's intent was clear: to fashion colonial gentlemen, Afro-Saxons as some historians have called them, capable of administering the colonies but never transforming them. Sir John could easily have returned to that comfort, but he chose instead to confront the raw inequities he saw in the countryside, the collapse of the plantation system, the hunger and hopelessness of rural communities left behind by empire. That encounter between his education and his environment ignited a conviction that St. Lucians must be the authors of their own destiny.
Dr. Jules revealed a compelling personal anecdote illustrating Compton's intellectual confidence. The statesman's request that Jules, despite his radical political history, offer his biography. This, Jules suggested, demonstrated Compton's security in allowing historical scrutiny because he understood authentic history constitutes truth rendered through chronological distance rather than contemporary flattery. The Director General pivoted to the evening's philanthropic objective, directly linking the proposed National Museum to a nation's capacity to narrate its own historical trajectory.
Sir John Compton Memorial Foundation, under Lady Janice's steadfast leadership, has embodied his conviction that education is the pathway out of poverty and the foundation of freedom. For 15 years, some of us may have thought the foundation was starting today. For 15 years, this foundation has quietly transformed lives, paying examination fees for students in need, providing transportation for young musicians such as those we saw today, supporting teachers' studies, and helping schools acquire instruments that enrich the spirit as much as the mind. And now in this centenary year, by dedicating tonight's proceeds to the creation of a national museum, the foundation is enabling Saint Lucia to know itself, to tell its own story through its own voice. For a nation that prides itself on producing Nobel laureates in economics and literature, the absence of a national museum is a silence that must be filled.
Jules announced that the OECS Commission would contribute financially to the museum project while simultaneously issuing his own challenge, calling upon all who interacted with Sir John to document their experiences through written or video testimonials, thereby enriching the archival foundation upon which the museum's narrative would be constructed.
Prepare them in a way that can meet the supermarket shelf and meet the hotels.